Good morning, Good Life. Hope you guys are doing well on this Saturday. You know, Saturdays are just a little bit different. You get up and maybe you have some games to go to, maybe you have some chores to check off, maybe you have some projects to complete, but Saturdays have a little bit less structure, so you have a lot more time with your family. But what do you do when you have a series of days that have a lot less structure, when you're facing weeks at a time where the normal rhythms of life aren't happening? Let alone, what do you do when you have that time in the shadow of a global pandemic? Today I want to talk to anybody who has kids in their lives. Obviously, parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, and people like that. But if you have children that you interact with, or you know people who do interact with children, this is for you to either sharpen you or encourage them. I want to talk about how we as adults can lead our kids through the COVID-19 crisis. We're not the only people who've ever faced trying times, but God's Word speaks very specifically in a number of places about how adults are supposed to pass on the faith to kids. And as the people of Israel are heading toward the promised land, as they're getting closer and closer, Moses calls them together to remind them what's most important and to remind them what their task is as people who love God. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, he says this: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart." Notice the call to own your personal faith. You can't pass on what you don't have. So knowing God yourself is essential for leading your kids to know God as well. But he goes on to say this in verse 7, "You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise." Passing the baton of faith is one of the most important things any generation will do, but it is not something that happens without intentionality. But it is something that can happen without formality. Sometimes we think the imparting of knowledge is reserved for the classroom or reserved for the church, and we outsource the faith building of our kids to the Sunday schools, to the churches, to the Christian schools, to the professional religious people. But the task that's here is anybody who has kids in their lives. It's certainly a call to parents, but I will broaden that circle to anybody who interacts with kids. Our responsibility is to train them up in the way they should go. And notice that it's not just in formal settings. It's when you sit in your house, and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down at night, and when you get up in the morning. Our task is to pass on the baton of faith. But we have to understand the context of when this is happening. The people of Israel have been wandering for 40 years, wandering the wilderness, facing hardship after hardship, many of them self-inflicted, but hard times nonetheless. And they're on the verge of heading into the promised land to enter into a time of war. They are experiencing painful, unexpected, unprecedented times for their culture. But that did not change the call of God on their lives. The adults that knew God were supposed to help the next generation know God as well. And we're called to do the same thing. Nothing about this global pandemic changes God's call in our lives. If anything, I believe it provides an opportunity for us to even do it better. We are a busy people, highly distracted, and right now we have a lot of unstructured days with many opportunities within them. So I want to give you 3 ways to help lead your kids through the COVID-19 crisis. The first one is this: to find purpose in the pause. To not let this just become, yes, you're checking off some list of some projects you want to get completed, you're organizing the closets, you're navigating being this unexpected and unplanned homeschool teacher, right? We're all having to deal with that. But find purpose in the pause, to let this be a time where you do exactly what God's Word says. That when you sit in your house, when you walk along the way, when you lie down, and when you rise, you're finding purpose in imparting faith to the next generation. One of the ways you can do that, number 2, is to show them that faith is greater than fear. More specifically, to show them that the object of our faith is greater than the content of our fears. There's so many things that are going on in our world around us, so many things that could make us fearful. And I will tell you, when you deal with children, far more is caught than is taught. They will mimic what we do far sooner than they will do what we say. And so how we navigate this season as people of faith, how we navigate this season in looking and fixing our eyes on Christ, will be passed on. And we can show them that faith is greater than fear. Let your kids hear more about who God is than they hear about what the government is saying or what the virus is doing. Faith is greater than fear. And third, to develop a pattern of prayer. To develop within your house a pattern of prayer so that your kids see that we are reacting to this by leaning into the God who controls this, by crying out to Him for help, by crying out to Him for strength, by putting before Him and interceding for those who are on the front lines, for our leaders, for the people who are doing research, for the people who are treating the sick, for the people who are running toward the virus to help people who are infected with it. And to put before them and have them understand that we can pray for a cure, we can pray for treatment, we can pray for a miracle, because we can expect great things from our great God, but we come to Him without a sense of entitlement. If we will do those things, we can help lead our kids through this COVID-19 crisis, and they will come out of it on the other side, stronger for having gone through it, stronger for having seen the faith in us, and stronger in having stories to tell to the next generation about how faithful God was in a time when everything seemed out of control. Nothing about this crisis changes God's calling on our lives to impart our faith to our kids. So Good Life Church, I encourage you, find purpose in this pause. Show them that faith is greater than fear, and make sure they understand that prayer works. Our God who's on the throne, He sees us, He hears us, and He cares about us. Let's take this opportunity to pass the baton of faith to the next generation. Hopefully be able to join us tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Our Good Life Kids service will go live, and at 9:30 our worship service will go live. Invite your friends that may not have a church home to join us online. I'm sure some people are really needing some hope in this time, as tomorrow we rally around the story where Jesus is crucified and how what we can learn by fixing our eyes on Him. We'll see you then.